Hello everybody. You're going to take notes on, sorry, no you're not. You're going to check your answers on the third quarterly SGO review guide. You should check over all your answers and make corrections so that you know what you're doing wrong or what you're doing correctly. So this is what the top of the quarterly review guide looks like. Make sure you have that one out in front of you. If not, pause the video and get the correct one out. Looking at the first question, the quantities x and y are proportional. What is the missing value in the table? So the key word here would be proportional, right? As soon as I see that word proportional, I know that I could use a proportion to solve for the missing quantity. So I'm going to throw a y in the table there because that's the missing value. And I could use any of the pairs on the table. I'm going to just choose the first one. Okay, and I'm going to set this up as x over y equals x over y. So I'm going to take the first ordered pair right here, and I'm going to do 2 over 3. That's my x value, and my y value for that is 6. And I'm going to set that equal to 5 using these two values. I definitely want to throw that in there. Over, I don't know the y, so I'm going to use my variable, y. And you could solve that using your cross product property. So I'm going to multiply 2/3 times y. And then I'm going to multiply 6 times 5. Okay, 2/3 times y is 2/3 y. And 6 times 5 is 30. And I'm going to solve that one-step equation. I need to get y all by itself. In order to get y by itself, I need to get rid of that 2/3. This 2/3 y is multiplication. The inverse would be division, but we don't divide fractions. We multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over 2. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do to the other. And over here, my 3's cross cancel, my 2's cross cancel. I'm left with 1y, or how about just y, equals, and I could do some cross canceling here. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 30 divided by 2 is 15, and I'm just going to multiply straight across. 15 times 3 is 45, and 1 times 1 is 1, so I could just leave that as y equals 45. And that's your answer for number 1. Number 2, same idea. When you see the quantities, distance, and time are proportional. As soon as I see that word, I know I could use a proportion. Then the question asks, how far will you travel in 20 minutes? So I could use any of the two options in here. I'm going to set this up as distance over time equals distance over time. So I have 1 mile. I'm going to use this one right here. I like to use the smaller numbers. I could use any of the values in that table, but I use the lower numbers because it's just going to make my life easier when I'm doing cross product property. Over 15 minutes equals, we want to know about 20 minutes. So I'm going to go 20 minutes goes down here, and I don't know how many miles, so that would be x miles. And I could use the cross product property to solve that. So I'm going to multiply 15 times x, and that would be 15x. And then I'm going to use the cross product property over here and do 1 mile times 20. 1 times 20 which is 20. Set that up as my equation. 15x equals 20. I want to get my x all by itself. So I need to get rid of that 15, the multiply by 15. The inverse would be to divide by 15 on both sides. The 15s cancel out. I'm left with x equals, and 20 divided by 15 is not, doesn't divide evenly. You could simplify that. They're both divisible by 5. So 20 divided by 5 is 4. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 4/3, but we're looking for distance, so 4/3, you wouldn't say 4/3 miles. You would change that to a mixed number in this case, 1 and 1/3 miles would be the correct answer. I would change that into a mixed number to write it properly. Question number 3, we have A equals -9, B equals -6. What is the value of the absolute value of A minus B? So I'm going to just rewrite my problem. Then I'm going to plug in my values, -9 minus -6, with the absolute value there. Okay, when you have those absolute value symbols, remember you do everything inside first. It's like a grouping symbol. So we're going to do -9 minus -6. Then when we're all done with everything inside, we find the absolute value. Okay, I have that double negative there, so I'm going to add the inverse. Keep that -9, change my subtraction to addition, change my -6 to a +6. You're going to add the inverse operation. So we have -9 plus 6. Since you have different signs, you will subtract. 9 minus 6 is 3, and that would be a -3 because 9's the bigger number. And the absolute value of -3 is 3. That will be your answer for number 3. Number 4, when A equals -9 and B equals -6, what is the value of the absolute value of A plus B? Okay, same idea. Just going to rewrite my problem, plug in my values, -9 plus -6, absolute value of that. Again, do what's inside the absolute value first, so -9 plus -6, I have same signs add. I get -15, and then I find the absolute value of -15. How far away is -15 from 0? And it would be 15. Next problem we have, write the following ratio in simplest form. Okay, I have 2 feet to 4 inches. Okay, you cannot write the ratio with feet and inches. You got to convert one or the other. In this case, I'm going to change my 2 feet to inches. Okay, so there are 12 inches in 1 foot. So in 2 feet, there are 24 inches. So I'm going to just rewrite that as 24 inches to 4 inches. Now I have inches and inches, so I could write it as a ratio. I'm going to do that as 24 inches over 4 inches. The ratio is the comparison of two numbers by division. And then I'm going to simplify that. They're both divisible by 4. 24 divided by 4 is 6. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. And I do need to keep that over 1 because it is a ratio. The ratio is the comparison of two numbers by division. You have to leave that over 1. Number 8, we have $2 to 50 cents. Again, we need to convert that to the same unit. So 100 cents equals $1. So $2 equals 200 cents to 50 cents. Okay, now I have cents and cents, so I could write that as a ratio, 200 cents to 50 cents. And I could simplify that. They're both divisible by 50. 200 divided by 50 is 4, and 50 divided by 50 is 1. And again, we're going to leave that over 1. 4 cents to 1 cent is your ratio. 4 cents over 1 cent. We have an oil spill spreads 25 square meters every 1/6 hour. Okay, I'm just going to underline my important information here. How much area does the oil spill cover after 2 hours? So we want to know like the distance, how many square meters after 2 hours. There's a couple different ways to do this. So you may have chosen a different way to do this. You might have thought this out. If there's 1/6 of an hour, that would be 6 in an hour, 12. You could kind of think it out that way. You could always use a proportion. Anytime you have problems like this, proportions always work well. So let me just show you using a proportion. And again, if you didn't use this method, you used another method, that is correct. If you want to, send a message about that or ask in class about if this is your way is a correct way, we will let you know. But you could use a proportion. So we have 25 square meters. You could write that as meters squared as well, over 1/6 hour equals how many square meters in 2 hours. Okay, that would be a proportion that'll get you the right answer as well. Again, this is not the only way to do this. Okay, and I could again use the cross product property. 25 times 2, which is 50, and 1/6 times x, which is 1/6 x. So 1/6 x equals 50. I want to solve getting x all by itself. I am going to multiply by the reciprocal of 6/1 on both sides. So it cancels out. I'm left with x equals 50 times 6 is 300 square meters. Or you could say meters squared. Either one is fine. Okay, again, if you solve that a little bit differently, that would be okay. Okay, you maybe thought there are, 1/6 of an hour, there's 6 of those in 1 hour, so 12 in 2 hours, and then just ended up multiplying 25 by 12 and still got 300 square meters. That is totally an option. You could find the unit rate and then multiply by 2. That would work as well. Okay, let's take a look at the next problem. We have Susie walks 1.5 miles in 1/3 hour. How far does she walk in 2 hours? So, again, I'm going to underline some important information. 1.5 miles in 1/3 hour. How far does she walk in 2 hours? So, again, we could use a proportion. You could find unit rate. You could think this out, okay, and make that 1/3 of an hour. There's 3 of them. How many are in 6? You could use that multiplication method there. That's an option. I'll set it up as a proportion for you, and then I could show you the other way. So we have 1 1/2 miles. We'll do miles over hours. 1/3 hour. We want to know how many miles in 2 hours. So we'll use the cross product property, multiplying 1/3 times x, which is 1/3 x, and then we'll multiply 1/2 times, 1.5 times 2. I'm going to change that to 3/2 times 2/1, and that gives me 3. And I'm going to solve that. Multiply by the reciprocal, 3/1 on both sides. And x equals 9 miles. Make sure you label that. Okay? Okay, so another way of thinking of that, if it's 1 1/3 hour, so that would be 3 1/3s in 1 hour, and then 6 in 2 hours. So you could have done 1.5. This is a different way of thinking. 1.5 times 6 would have been another thought process that you may have had, because there are 6/3 in 2 hours. So that would be 3/2 times 6/1, and again, you get the same answer, 9 miles. Okay, it's using a different way to solve that, and not the proportion method, but you still get the same answers, and that's totally acceptable. Okay, question number 11, that is an equation. Just solving that equation is nice and simple. I'm going to rewrite the problem just a little bit bigger, and I would solve that by getting x all by itself. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Make sure you line up your decimal here. Negative 5 plus 5 cancels out. You're left with x over 3 equals 7.2, 7 and 2/10. And then you're going to multiply by 3 on both sides to get x all by itself. My 3's cross cancel. I'm left with 1x, or just x. And 7 and 2/10 times 3 is 21 and 6/10. Number 12, we have 7x plus 2 equals negative 42. Okay, I'm going to solve that by getting x all by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides of the equal sign. I get 7x equals negative 44. And then I will divide by 7 on both sides. And x going to equal 44 does not divide evenly by 7, so we can just leave it as a simplified improper fraction, and it actually is simplified, so negative 44 over 7 for that one. Number 13, writing that as a ratio in simplest form, 1/3 to 3/4. So we have 1/3 written as a ratio to 3/4. Okay? In order to write that, the method I prefer would be to find the common denominator for both. Now, you may have used different methods, but this is the one that I prefer because it makes the most sense to me of why it's the ratio. And I'm going to rewrite this as 3 times 4 equals 12. 1 times 4 is 4/12. And then 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. So if I have 4/12 to 9/12, writing that as a ratio, 4/12 to 9/12 would be 4 to 9. Okay, if you used a different method, that always works. That's okay. But this makes sense of why that would be that ratio. 4/12 to 9/12 would be 4 to 9. 2 and 5/10 to 3 and 75/100, writing it as a ratio. Again, I have the way I like to do this, 2 and 5/10 to 3 and 75/100. Okay, the simplest way would be move that decimal out, multiply by 100, so that would be 250 over 375. And if we are going to simplify that, you can simplify that by dividing by, well, something that you might see off the top of your head, 5, or maybe you would see 25 would be a good estimate there. So 250 divided by 25 would be 10. And 375 divided by 25 would be 10 over 15. We could continue. Divide by 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. And 15 divided by 5 is 3. So 2 over 3 is the ratio there. Okay, next one. What number belongs in the box to make the statement true? Okay, you can think this out using the multiplication method. You could use the cross products method. Either one works. You could put an X in that box to make it look like a proportion that we've been solving. But using the multiplication method, I just want to rewrite this a little bit bigger for myself. And there is the negative there, but you also have the negative there. So if this number is a negative, then and this number is a negative, you don't really have to worry about the negative there. So I could think of this as, using the multiplication method, which I like you to think about on these easier problems, 1 times 3, or negative 1 times 3 is negative 3, and 3 times 3 would give you 9. So x equals 9. You could have also used the cross product property, and you could have multiplied -1 times x and -3 times 3. And that would have given you -1x equals -9, and then divided by -1 on both sides. And x would equal +9. So either one of those two methods would be a good way to solve number 15. And same thing with 16. 16 is a little bit trickier because it's not as obvious as an answer, so using your cross product method might be your best bet. We have that -1, and I'm going to change that box to an x, equals 3/2. So if you wanted to use the cross product property on this one, -1 times 2, and 3 times x. 3 times x is 3x, and -1 times 2 is -2. And then you could solve that by dividing by 3 on both sides. And that's why this one's a little trickier, because you're going to leave your answer just like that as x equals -2/3. That one's a little bit trickier, but if you just solve your proportion, it's nice and easy. Number 17, we have the ratio of boys to girls in class is 3:2. Okay, so I like to mark that up. We have boys and we have girls. The 3 represents the boys, and the 2 represents the girls. And then we have there are 20 students in the class. How many are girls? Okay, so we can't do a proportion. We could do a proportion here to solve this, but you've got to be careful with how you write that. You have boys, you have girls, and you have students. We need 2 different units to talk about. So I could take my 3 to 2, okay? If there's 3 boys and 2 girls, my total here, 3 plus 2, would give me 5 students, okay? And that might be something, or that would be something you would use in your ratio. So I need to talk about girls, and I need students. So girls over students equals girls over students. Okay? So there are 2 girls to 5 students. I'm going to just abbreviate that. And we want to know how many girls to 20 students. Okay, and you could easily solve that using your multiplication method, or you could use cross product property. But if you look at this, 5 times 4 is 20. So 2 times 4 is 8 girls. Okay, if you wanted to figure out how many boys there are, you could change your 2 to a 3 and use the same proportion, or you could subtract 20 minus 8 and get the answer that way. It would be 12. Okay? Next problem, the ratio of boys to girls in a class are 3:2. So we have boys and girls. The 3 represents the boys, the 2 represents the girls, and there's 24 girls. How many are boys? Do you see the difference between this question and the last one? The last one gave me boys to girls and then talked about total 20 students. This one is boys to girls, girls to boys. You don't have to worry about doing any addition there. So we could do boys to girls equals boys to girls. So I have 3 boys over 2 girls. We want to know how many are boys if there are 24 girls. Again, this is nice and easy. We could use the multiplication method to solve that, or you could use cross product, but 2 times 12 is 24. So 3 times 12 is 36 boys. Next question, we have 2y minus 3y equals 5. So to solve this, the first step would be, I'm just going to, again, write that bigger. And first step would be combine your like terms. 2y minus 3y. We have different signs, so you're going to subtract. And you get a negative 1y, or negative y, equals 5. And then to solve that, I need to get rid of that negative. You can't have a negative y or a negative 1y. So I'm going to divide by negative 1 on both sides. And my negative 1's cancel out. And I am left with y equals negative 5. Similar type question on number 20. This one is a little bit trickier because I have variables on both sides. But I'm still going to 2y minus 3y equals 5 plus y. I'm still going to combine my like terms. 2y on either side of the equal sign minus 3y is negative 1y equals 5 plus y. Now I'm going to get my variable on one side of the equation. So I'm going to move my positive y to the left side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 1y there, and I'll subtract 1y there. These cancel out. On the left side, I have negative 2y equals 5. And then I want to continue solving by getting y by itself. I want to get rid of that negative 2. The inverse of multiplication would be to divide by negative 2 on both sides of the equation. Those cancel out. And I get y equals negative 5 over 2. Number 21. Find the unit rate. 84 miles in 4 days. The unit rate is how many miles per 1 day. Okay, so I like to set that up as 84 miles for 4 days, and the only thing you have to do is divide 84 divided by 4, and you get 21 miles per 1 day. Okay, you just got to remember that unit rate. You just divide. You want to know how many miles per 1 day. And for number 2, we have the unit rate for 22. 284 miles in 12 gallons. So 284 miles for 2 gallons. I want to know how many miles per 1 gallon. 284, that's a 12. Divided by 12. And 284 divided by 12, you get a decimal there. It's 0.6 repeating. Okay, and if you used your calculator, you would see that, but we're not going to round that or anything. Why don't we just write that as a fraction? 23 and 2/3 miles per 1 gallon. Okay, and that one you would write as a mixed number, not an improper fraction, because we're talking about distance, and that's where you mix it. You leave it as a mixed number. Okay, 23. When you see problems with all these crazy fractions, I mean, wouldn't be too bad if there was some cross-canceling that we could do. But if you look, you're multiplying everything at the end by 0. And any number multiplied by 0 is 0. Okay? Whenever you see big problems like that, you always use your associative property and try to find like the easiest way to do that. The associative property here, you multiply everything by 0, it's 0, or the multiplicative property of 0. Okay, same thing with 24. Look for another easier way to do that. Yes, we could add and subtract and find common denominators, but if you look real closely, we have a positive 5/6 and a negative 5/6. That would be the additive inverse property, so that would be 1. That would be 0. Additive inverse, when you add the opposite, you get 0. And then 7/8 plus 0 would be 7/8. So those are pretty simple problems. They look like they're not going to be fun, but they were nice and easy. Number 25, solving a proportion. Pretty simple. Looks like this will be a nice, easy quarterly. 7/5 equals 21 over x. We're going to use cross products property. I think that would be, oh, no, you could use multiplication. Nice and easy. 7 times 3 is 21. So 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, on number 26, we have 7 over 5 equals 21 over x plus 1. You could do this a couple different ways, but cross product works well. And I'm going to multiply 7 times the quantity of x plus 1. And that you have to distribute. 7 times x is 7x. 7 times 1 is 7. And then you're going to multiply 21 times 5, which is 105. And then you could solve your two-step equation. Gonna subtract 7 on both sides first. You get 7x equals 98. And then divide by 7 on both sides. And x equals 14. Number 27, we have those absolute value symbols. You're going to do everything inside the absolute symbols first. So, the first thing I look at is that I have a 1 negative. So my answer is going to be negative. I'm multiplying 3 numbers and only 1 negative. Then I'm going to look for some cross-canceling, which I could do cross-cancel out my 2 and my 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Then you can multiply straight across. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 4 times 5 is 20. And then find the absolute value of negative 1/20, which is 1/20. Okay, on number 28, don't lose this negative that you have on the outside. So I have a negative absolute value of, and again, it looks like it's the same exact problem, just with that negative on the outside. So I still have a negative here because we have 1. My 2's cancel out. And I'll just do it again, just in case I made a silly mistake on the last one. I'll catch it now. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. And 1 times 4 times 5 is 20. The absolute value of negative 1/20 is 1/20, but I have this negative, so I need to bring that down. Negative 1 over 20 is my answer for 28. 29. This is a tricky question. Glow green paint calls for a mixture of 1 2/3 cup of blue paint and 1/3 cup of yellow. Okay, we're mixing paint here. Blue and yellow make green. So you mix the blue and the yellow and you're making this special color of green paint. Mrs. Semino needs 12 cups of the green paint. So she wants a total of 12 cups of green paint. How much blue paint is needed? Okay, so this is similar to the boy-girl question that we did on number 17. Okay, you had boys, you had girls, and you had total students. Here we have blue, and we have yellow, and then we have blue and yellow mixed together, total. Okay, so the best way to do this is if you have 1 2/3 of blue plus 1/3 of yellow. Together, that would make 1 2/3 plus 1/3, you should be able to do that mentally, is 2 cups of green. Okay, so when I mix the ratio that they give me, I have 2 cups of green, but I need 12 cups of green. So you could set this up as a proportion, and what we're looking for is the amount of blue. So we have 1 2/3 cups of blue. Oops. Over 2 cups of green. It's the total. We want to know how much blue for 12 cups of green. Okay, so you could use your multiplication method here if you want, or cross product, it doesn't matter. But it's easy enough to see that 2 times 6 is 12. So 1 2/3 times 6. And I'm going to do 1 2/3 times 6 to get the answer there. I'm going to make that 5/3 times 6. Cross cancel, 3 divided by 3 is 1, 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 5 times 2 is 10 cups of green. Okay, and if you were asked how much yellow, I could go from the 10. Well, if there's 10, I'm sorry, it's not cups of green. It is cups of blue. I could go and figure out how much yellow I need, because if there's 10 cups of blue in a total of 12, I need 2 cups of yellow. Or you could change this number here to 1/3 and do the same process, 1/3 times 6. Okay, that one is a tricky one. That one's probably the hardest one that's going to be on your quarterly. This is similar to that last one, just another practice problem just like that one. Trail mix. Trail mix calls for a mixture of 2 1/3 cups of peanuts and 1 2/3 cups of raisins. Okay, so when you make trail mix, you mix the peanuts and the raisins together. Just like you mix the yellow and the blue paint together, you mix the peanuts together with the raisins to make the trail mix. Mrs. Airy needs 12 cups of trail mix. How much of each is needed? Okay, so with this ratio, I have how much of the trail mix so far. So if I have 2 1/3 plus 1 2/3 all together, you could think that out mentally, or you could add it. You get 4 cups of trail mix. 4 cups of trail mix total, right? So we want to know how much of each. So this one, they're asking for both. So I could take either one. I could take the 2 1/3, or I could take the 1 2/3. So I'm going to look for the peanuts first. 2 1/3 of peanuts to a total of 4 trail. We want to know how much of the peanuts if we have 12 cups of trail mix. Okay, we could use the multiplication method to solve this, because 4 times 3 is 12, so 2 1/3 times 3 will give me my peanuts. 2 1/3 times 3, that would be 7/3 times 3, and you get 7 cups of peanuts. And I could use the same proportion to find the raisins if I want, or I could just do 12 minus 7 to get 5 cups of raisins. Number 31, we're going to evaluate. So we are going to use our order of operations. So following our order of operations, we want to look for grouping symbols, which there are none. We want to look for exponents, which there are none. Multiplication and division from left to right. So we have -2 times 8, which is -16 divided by 2 plus 5 minus 24. Okay, and then I have to continue. -16 divided by 2 is -8 plus 5 minus 24. And you could do addition and subtraction from left to right. -8 plus 5 is -3 minus 24. And you have same signs there, so you're going to add, you get -27. Same thing on number 32, following your order of operations. So we have -2 times 8 divided by 2 would be 4. And then 5 minus 24 would be negative 19. I did both of those grouping symbols at the same time, which you could do when they're separated like that. Okay, now I'm going to continue across. I have multiplication and addition. I'm going to do the multiplication first. Negative 8 plus a negative 19. And I have same sign, so I'm going to add, and I get negative 27. Same answer. Number 33, you're determining if the two ratios are proportional or not. So you could use cross product property. Works well. We're determining if 3/8 and 4/9 are proportional. It's a pretty simple one, but we'll do the math just to prove it. 8 times 4 is 32, and 3 times 9 is 27, and 32 does not equal 27, so it is not proportional. Okay, and the next one, we have 3/8 and 13/40, so we could do cross product again. 3 times 40 is 120, and 8 times 13 is 104. 120 does not equal 104, so they are not proportional. Okay, 36, we have a quiz is worth a total of 40 points. If Susie earns 80%, how many points did she earn? This goes back to Chapter 5, Section 2, when we were just writing the proportions and we weren't solving them, but now we could solve them because we know how to. So that was when we had like points earned over total points. And we set that equal to our percent earned over our total percent, which is always 100. Okay, so the quiz is worth 40 points. That would be the total points. Okay, and we want to know, this is always 100 because the best percent is 100. If Susie earns an 80, how many points did she earn? So what's going in the grade book when it's at a 40? This is a 40. Sorry, that's sloppy. Okay, you could use cross product property if you'd like. 100 times x is 100x. 80 times 40 is 3,200. Divide by 100 on both sides. Could get rid of my zeros there. And x equals 32 points earned. Number 37, a notebook is worth a total of 30 points. This is the same type of question. If Susie earns 80%, how many points did she earn? Okay, so again, we want to know how many points out of a total of 30 if she got an 80 out of 100. Using the cross product, 100 times x is 100x, and 80 times 30 is 2,400. Divide by 100, and x equals 24 points earned. 24 points earned. 38, solving the proportion. We could use the cross product property. 2x times 15 would give me 30x, and 9 times 5 would give me 45. And I'm going to solve that one-step equation by dividing by 30 on both sides. Okay, and 45 does not divide by 30 evenly, so I would just simplify it. Both divisible by 15. 45 divided by 15 is 3. 30 divided by 15 is 2. 3 over 2 is what it would simplify to. Number 39, 2x times 15. This is the same exact problem. So I'm not going to solve it. It would be the same. X equals 3/2. Okay, and if you have any questions, just write them down. You can ask me or your teacher whenever. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.